Detail components are used for quick insertion of commonly drawn two-dimensional items. They are most often used in section views and drafting views to document often drawn items that don't require modeling in 3D. Where we can find those is going to be underneath Annotate, and then sort of toward the middle here, we have this option for Component. If we select on the word Component, we can then see the list of our different detail components that are currently loaded in the project over here underneath Properties in the Type Selector list. Now, what we're looking at right here are CMU blocks, as well as some metal decking, and in this case, it says a W wide flange section. Now, I'm not going to actually place this, but just so you can see it, if I click on the W12 by 26 and move my mouse over, we can now see we have that steel beam shape. If I moved over here instead, change that to be a CMU block shape, move it back over, and then if I would want to place this kind of object into my view, all I would have to do is click. Now, we will be doing that here in a moment, but I do want to point out that we're not just limited to these shapes that are coming in our project by default. What we can do is that we can come over here to where it has Load Family and select on Load Family. So once you click on Load Family, there's going to be an option here for Detail Items. If you double click on that, here we have our different divisions. And we can choose from one of these different divisions what kind of detail that we might want to load into our project. For instance, if we decided to go into masonry, just go ahead and double click on that. We have our different further divisions that we can pick on. And in this case, maybe we want to do concrete unit masonry. Here, if we click on one of these options and then use the arrow keys on our keyboard, we can start to scroll through all these different two-dimensional components that we could decide to just load directly into our project. It could be different steel shapes, obviously masonry units, wood shapes, trusses, you name it, there's a good chance that you can find it somewhere as a detail component inside of Revit, just coming by default. One other thing that I'll mention is if you ever want to be able to create these things from scratch, it is possible to do that as well. I'm just going to hit cancel to this. All you have to do is come up here to the big R. You're going to do a new family. And then down here on the list, you'll see that there's an option for detail item. And you'll just double click on that. It'll open up what's called the family editor. And then you can start drawing in one of these detail components. Now, we will be doing some modifications to a detail component here in just a moment, so I'm not going to click on open right now, but this is where you can find the base template to be able to draw any of these detail components in. So I'm going to go ahead and move over here and hit cancel, and we're going to go ahead and insert in our very first detail component into this view. Now, the detail component that we want to place is going to be this metal deck component, and I'm going to pick on this 1.5-inch metal deck. Next, move over here into the project, and here we can see that ribbing that's associated with the metal deck, usually if you're cutting in section. Now, I realize that this particular floor that we're getting ready to place this in, technically it's a slab. It doesn't really have this metal deck associated with it. But if this had been a flooring condition where the metal deck would actually need to be in, this is a great representation of how you would go about placing it in. So next, we can just move over here and click once. Keep moving over, click again. You'll almost feel them snap into place really once they get kind of to the end of another one. So you can do even spacing, but there's a better way to be evenly spacing this metal deck going all the way on across. In order to be able to do that, there's actually another command which is directly related to this command that we're currently in. So underneath Annotate, we're going to look for a component, but instead of clicking on component, we're going to look for this little triangular shape that shows up right next to it. Click on that, and this time we're going to use a repeating detail component. A repeating detail component is exactly what it sounds like. It's a detail component just like we just placed, except it allows itself to be repeated again and again and again. Now, if we look over here on the list, we currently have CMU, but there's also an option for the metal deck. Let's go ahead and click on that metal deck. We're going to pick the endpoint over there that last detail component was at, and then just move straight on over. You can see how it's repeating that detail again and again and again. Right now, it's showing up on the underside. That's not really a big deal for us. All we have to do is hit the space bar, and it'll automatically flip it to the other side. and then just click once you get out to the end of the view. So you can see how easy it is to repeat a detail component again and again. One thing that I'd like to do with this detail component though, is right now we're still seeing the concrete going through it, and realistically, in this condition, there wouldn't be any concrete in here. So we're going to need to come in here and modify the detail component so we can no longer see that concrete. So to do it, we're going to select on one of the detail components, in this case, this one piece of metal deck, and we're going to come up here to Edit Family. And when we click on Edit Family, it's going to take us immediately into what's called the Family Editor. This is the exact same environment that I was talking about earlier, where we could draw one of these things from scratch. The only difference is this already has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines already drawn inside of it, and it just happens to be this particular detail component that we've been placing. Now, what we're going to need to do in order to be able to modify this is either A, we could select on the individual lines and then make changes to it. This is just like using our normal line work tools inside of Revit. Or, what's going to really help us in this case to be able to get rid of that extra material, is we're going to need to create a masking region on the inside of this. Now, a masking region, its whole job in life is to be able to mask out other materials that might be in the way. So we're going to go ahead and select on masking region. Next, over here, there's this option here. It says detail items. We want to choose invisible lines. Detail items is actually a line style that they created inside of this template, and so is invisible lines. If you use invisible lines, these are lines that will not show up in the view that they've been drawn in, essentially. So we're going to select each of these points using our line work tool and just sort of play connect the dots all the way around our detail. And then click the big green check mark. And then click somewhere out here in space. Right now, we really can't see much going on in here, but the reason is just a little white masking out background that's showing up here. Now we need to load this into our project. So we can come up here to load in the project and just click on that big button there. If you have more than one project open, it'll ask you which project do you want to load it in. After you do that, you may get this menu that says you're trying to load the family metal deck, and it goes on. But essentially it's asking, do you want to update the current family that's in your project? And the answer is yes, we do. And when we do that, keep an eye on each of these. Because we added that masking region in, we should no longer see that material there in the background. See how it just masks that material out in each and every one of these locations? Now, it's important to remember that whenever we're doing this, this is not a three-dimensional item. If we need to place this in other views, we would have to draw it again. Now, when I say that, this is now still available to us over here on our list. So if we ever need to be able to place one of these detail items in, it's not a big deal. From here on out, all we have to do is come up here to annotate and then pick the detail component off of the list. But this won't automatically show up in each and every section. You're going to have to draw it again, section by section by section, if you want this same level of detail to show up in each and every one of them. So, our detail components are perhaps the fastest way to draw and document commonly experienced conditions. They can be created by using the drafting tools that we find up there underneath the Annotate tab. Then all that's left is to simply insert that detail in to any view that you may require it in.